Good afternoon, I'm Bakhtiar Sonov and you are watching AnewZ. Let's see the top stories shaping our world. Donald Trump weighs U.S. involvement as Israel-Iran strikes intensify. Canada's Carney announces a new package of sanctions against Russia as the G7 summit wrapped up in Alberta. Georgia and Türkiye reaffirm commitment to boost Middle Corridor connectivity. U.S. President Donald Trump has held an emergency meeting with top national security officials at the White House on Tuesday. According to local media, the talks focused on possible U.S. involvement in Israel's military campaign against Iran.
U.S. President Donald Trump gathered his national security team at the White House on Tuesday for an emergency meeting. According to CBS News, the main topic was whether the U.S. should support Israeli airstrikes on Iranian nuclear facilities. The White House has not confirmed what was discussed. One possible target, the network says, is Fordo, a heavily fortified uranium enrichment site in Iran. CBS also reports that Trump's advisors remain divided on whether to take direct military action. A White House official said Trump spoke to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu by phone on Tuesday. What they discussed hasn't been made public. Donald Trump also posted a warning in social media that the U.S. knows where Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is hiding, calling him an easy target, though saying there are no plans for now to act. He called for the country's unconditional surrender. Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei responded online, saying Israel would be shown no mercy and called for a strong response to Israeli strikes. The conflict has entered its sixth day. Israeli military authorities say more missiles were launched from Iran early Wednesday morning local time. The IDF also reported has struck uranium centrifuge production sites and weapons factories in Iran overnight. Iran reports 224 deaths, while Israel says 24 people have died on its side. In both countries, evacuations of residents from their homes are underway. Meanwhile, the US is stepping up its military presence in the Middle East. Reuters reports that more fighter jets and warships are being deployed, with officials calling it a defensive move to protect American forces and intercept incoming missiles.
Once a figure in U.S. politics, former Senator Bob Menendez has officially begun serving time behind bars. The 71-year-old is now in federal custody after being sentenced for a sweeping corruption scheme involving foreign governments, gold bars, and stacks of hidden cash.
Former U.S. Senator Bob Menendez reported to federal prison on Tuesday to begin serving an 11-year sentence. The sentence follows a high-profile corruption case involving bribes and foreign influence. The 71-year-old Democrat surrendered at the Federal Correctional Institution in Schuylkill, Pennsylvania. He is expected to serve his time at the facility's minimum security camp due to the white-collar nature of his crimes. Menendez, who once chaired the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, was convicted in July 2024 for accepting bribes and acting as an unregistered agent for Egypt and Qatar. Prosecutors said he used his position to advance foreign interests in exchange for cash, gold bars, and luxury items. During a search of his home, FBI agents found $480,000 in cash hidden in clothing and furniture, 13 gold bars worth around $150,000, and a luxury convertible in his garage. At sentencing, the judge called Menendez a corrupt politician. The former senator has denied wrongdoing and recently lost an appeal to delay his prison term. He also asked President Donald Trump for a pardon or sentence reduction, repeating Trump's claims that the justice system is politically biased. His wife, Nadine Menendez, was also convicted in connection with the case and is scheduled to be sentenced in September.
G7 leaders meeting in Canada have reaffirmed support for Ukraine as President Volodymyr Zelensky urged more military aid and tougher sanctions on Russia. His appeal comes amid signs of division, with President Donald Trump leaving the summit early.
At the second day of the G7 summit in Canada, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky made a direct plea for greater support. Standing alongside Zelensky, Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney pledged billions of Canadian dollars in new military aid to Kyiv and announced a new package of sanctions against Russia.
With our international partners, we're launching a major new package of sanctions on individuals, on companies, on vessels, the Shadow Fleet, to exert maximum pressure on Russia. We're also sending over $2 billion in funding for drones, ammunition, armored vehicles to help Ukrainians defend their territory, as well as a $2.3 billion loan to help rebuild the infrastructure in that country. And take a moment to reiterate our condolences given the barbarism witnessed overnight in Kyiv caused by Russia.
A Canadian official initially said Ottawa had dropped plans for the G7 to issue a strong statement on the war in Ukraine after resistance from the United States. Zelensky used the moment to thank allies for new aid and repeated Ukraine's readiness to talk peace, but only if Russia feels the pressure.
It's a big tragedy for us, and we need support from our allies, and I'm here, and thank you for the military package. It's important for our soldiers to be strong at the battlefield, to stay strong until Russia will be ready for the peace negotiations. We are ready for the peace negotiations, unconditional ceasefire.
Meanwhile, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov on Tuesday referred to the G7 as rather useless after Russia was kicked out of the G8 in 2014. With conflict ongoing, Zelensky's visit underscored the stakes and the challenge of keeping allies aligned, echoed in the early departure of US President Donald Trump.
Australia has announced the start of negotiations on a new security and defense partnership with the European Union. The move was revealed on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Canada, where they also spoke about a possible free trade agreement.
Australia is set to begin formal talks on a new defence and security partnership with the European Union. It's after Prime Minister Anthony Albanese met with the European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen and European Council President Antonio Costa on the sidelines of the G7 summit in Canada. They discussed the EU proposal for a defence partnership, which Australian officials said did not have military deployment obligations. EU officials have clarified that the arrangement would not constitute a military alliance, similar to existing partnerships with Japan and South Korea.
I'm pleased to announce today that we will commence negotiations on a security and defence partnership with the European Union. We see this as an important framework for our current and future cooperation in areas like defence industry, cyber and counter-terrorism.
Albanese also voiced optimism over a long-stalled free trade agreement with the bloc, saying he's hopeful of a symbolically important trade deal.
Importantly, both of us emphasise that at this time it's the substance is what's important, but at this time it's also symbolically important to see an outcome of an expansion of trade.
Albanese's remarks came as Canadian Prime Minister and G7 host Mark Carney opened the now concluded summit with a warning that the world was at a turning point. With trade and defence both on the table, Australia's diplomatic push in Kananaskis underscores the importance of its role it can play in an ever-changing world.
The European Union plans to impose a full ban on Russian gas imports by the end of 2027. The European Commission has introduced new legislation to support this goal. According to the proposed rules, all new contracts signed by the end of this year will be banned from 2026 onwards. Short-term contracts will be banned starting since Tuesday, while existing long-term agreements will be terminated by early 2028. EU Commissioner Dan Jorgensen stated that the decision aims to end Europe's energy dependence on Russia and increase pressure on Moscow.
Thank you. Yes.
Thanks very much, Commissioner Rosie-Burke.
Markets are reacting to the ongoing conflict between Iran and Israel, with oil prices slightly dipping after rising 4% the day before.
Oil prices fell in Asian trading on Wednesday, easing back after a sharp rise the day before. Brent crude slipped by 49 cents to just under $76 a barrel, and US crude dropped to around $74. Traders are caught between two forces: fears of supply disruptions from the conflict between Iran and Israel, and a possible US interest rate decision that could lower demand. Analysts say this latest conflict could affect oil routes, especially through the Strait of Hormuz, a vital route that handles about 20% of the world's seaborne oil. Iran, one of the world's largest oil producers, pumps more than 3 million barrels per day. A direct hit to its oil facilities could push prices even higher, but experts from Fitch and the International Energy Agency believe other OPEC countries could cover the shortfall, at least in the short term. Still, major companies like Shell and Total Energies have warned that more attacks could severely disrupt global energy systems. The International Energy Agency said in a new report that geopolitical risks have created major uncertainty in the market, even though supply is expected to outpace demand next year. Oil prices have already climbed by $10 per barrel over the past 2 weeks. Analysts expect this risk premium to remain in the $5 to $10 range unless the conflict spreads further. Markets are also watching the US Federal Reserve, which is expected to keep interest rates unchanged. But some experts say the conflict could force an earlier rate cut to support the global economy. That in turn would likely push oil demand and prices higher again.
China is quietly boosting its oil reserves as tensions escalate in the Middle East. Experts see it as a strategic move to strengthen energy security and reduce exposure to global market shocks. Our Mahnur Maktoum has more in Beijing.
In an effort to shield itself from the volatile energy markets, China has quietly built up a significant crude oil surplus as tensions in the Middle East continue to rise, especially between Iran and Israel. In May, the country added around 1.4 million barrels per day to its reserves, the third month in a row of large stockpiling. This came as refinery output dropped to 13.9 million barrels per day, the lowest since last August, due to maintenance at several major plants. At the same time, China continued strong crude import and saw a small increase in domestic production. With the refinery demand slowing, all the extra oil is going into storage. Analysts say this is a smart move by Beijing to be better prepared for the global supply risk and help ease some of the price hike that is to be expected. Brent crude has already jumped nearly 6% since mid-June. The impact of China's stockpiling will likely be seen around August as shipment delays catch up. Refinery production is likely to resume in June-July, but with the Middle East still unstable, China may continue to keep buying oil for storage, perhaps from cheaper suppliers like Iran and Russia. This helps China control both its energy security and global market influence. Manu Maktoum, AnewZ, Beijing.
Again, we turn our attention to the escalating tension in the Middle East. Iran and Israel have launched fresh missile strikes with explosions reported over Tehran and Tel Aviv. Thousands are fleeing Iran's capital, and Donald Trump is now demanding Tehran's unconditional surrender. To help us unpack these dramatic developments, I'm joined by Daniela Melo, political scientist who connects with us from Lisbon, Portugal. Daniela, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So let's start with the significance of the emergency meeting at the White House. What does this signal about the likelihood of the direct U.S. military involvement in this conflict?
Well, the most probable read is, in fact, that the president is seriously considering taking direct action in Iran. That's certainly what most analysts and most experts on the functioning of the White House are claiming right now, we can certainly see that over the past few days, Donald Trump has shifted positions, and he appears to be favoring a position of joining a possible attack on Iran and helping Israel in that sense. It seems that there is some friction within the MAGA movement, even amongst the closest advisors to the president, over this issue. There should be friction because, in fact, the president ran on a platform of not getting directly engaged in conflict, especially in the Middle East. But it seems that Trump is, as he often is, being pragmatic. He's seeing an opportunity, and he's seriously considering whether the United States might benefit from helping Israel finish the job.
Daniela Melo, how might these tensions affect U.S. relations with key regional players like Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Gulf states?
That's a really, really good question. If the United States decides to engage directly with Iran, it becomes more likely that this becomes a widespread conflict that involves other regional actors. So it's going to be interesting, for instance, to see what Saudi Arabia in particular is going to do. I was reading reports, for instance, that in fact, the Iranians were reaching out to Saudi Arabia to try to persuade or to get Saudi Arabia to persuade the Israelis to a more moderate stance, and thus the Americans. So it will be interesting to see who's going to be acting as a mediator and who's going to be joining the United States, whether covertly or not, in attacking the regime in Iran. But what we have seen in particular is, I mean, this is a highly volatile situation. It's very easy to get into a war. It's very difficult to extricate oneself out of that war at will. So if the United States does make this decision, it is pulling itself back into the Middle East, and it may in fact exacerbate old wounds between the United States and many of the other players. But it could also change completely the balance of power in the Middle East, because if this regime collapses, first of all, we don't know what the next regime is going to look like, but we also don't know how other actors are going to align themselves.
Daniela Melo, thank you very much for talking to AnewZ. We appreciate your time. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
The second Central Asia-China summit has wrapped up in Astana. Our Fariza Kalimurzana has the details in Astana.
Central Asia and China have declared their intention to strengthen their eternal friendship. Following the meeting in Astana, the heads of the state signed the Astana Declaration of the Second Summit, as well as the Treaty of Eternal Good Neighborliness, Friendship and Cooperation. One of the key outcomes of the summit, a comprehensive action plan to deliver high-quality results under China's Belt and Road Initiative. Also, a memorandum on investment cooperation in the fields of green economy was signed. In total, 12 multilateral documents and 5 sister city agreements were signed. Astana was not chosen by chance. It was here back in 2013 that President Xi Jinping first unveiled the concept of the Silk Road economic belt. Over a decade later, the Kazakh capital is once again in the spotlight, symbolizing a new phase of regional integration. China announced $209 million in development aid for Central Asian nations. Kazakh President Kassym-Jomart Tokayev welcomed Xi's vision of building a community of shared destiny among neighboring countries. In turn, Tokayev proposed the creation of a joint cargo terminal at the Caspian Sea port of Kuruk. Energy cooperation was also high on the agenda. Kazakhstan expressed readiness to sign a deal with China on nuclear energy development. Xi Jinping, meanwhile, issued a clear warning against tariff and trade wars, saying such conflicts produce no winners. Global media have also taken note of the summit. Bloomberg noted that Xi's visit sends a strong signal. Central Asia is no strategic battleground where Beijing is ready to compete with the West for influence. But China's growing interest in Kazakhstan is not just geopolitical, it's also economic. China ranks among the top 5 investors in Kazakhstan, investing more than $26 billion into various sectors of the economy. As a result, more than 35 memorandums were signed during the summit, totaling over $17 billion, from the green energy and infrastructure to trade, logistics, and the development of regional hubs. The next Central Asia-China summit is scheduled for 2027, and this time it will be held on Chinese soil. Fariza Kalimurzina, AnewZ, in Astana, Kazakhstan.
Baku is hosting the International Symposium of Ombudsmen on Strengthening the Rule of Law, initiated by Azerbaijan's Human Rights Commissioner. The event marks the year of Constitution and Sovereignty and Human Rights Day. Ombudsmen and officials from 15 countries, along with MPs, experts, and civil society representatives are attending. The symposium features panels on protecting constitutional rights, ensuring equality, and boosting global cooperation on refugee rights. The head of Armenias National Security Service, Armen Abazyan, has been relieved of his duties by order of Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan. Abazyan had held the post since November 2020 and was reappointed in January 2024. The reasons for his dismissal have not been publicly disclosed until a permanent replacement is appointed. Deputy Director Andranik Simonyan will take over the responsibilities of the NSS leadership. Georgia's government has proposed dissolving the National Security Council with a formal request sent to Parliament. According to the proposal, the council would be abolished starting September, and its tasks would be performed by the government. If approved, the changes will be added to the law on national security policy, planning and coordination. The senior advisor to the U.S. Department of State, Wyatt Tolkey, met with Georgian Foreign Minister Maka Bochorishvili on Monday in Tbilisi. The discussion centered on U.S.-Georgia bilateral ties, regional security, and the future of strategic cooperation between the two nations. Amid growing geopolitical challenges, this meeting reflects Washington's ongoing engagement in the South Caucasus and Georgia's aspirations to deepen its partnership with the United States. To help us unpack the significance of this meeting and what it could mean for the region, I'm joined by Nika Chitadze, professor of the International Black Sea University. Nika Chitadze, thank you very much for joining us on AnewZ.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon.
Nika Chitadze, how do you assess the timing of this meeting between Wyatt Tolkey and Maka Bochorishvili? And also, the Georgian side mentioned a desire to renew its strategic partnership with the United States. What form could this renewal take, and what are its key drivers?
Thank you very much for your question, and with your permission and the permission of the audience, I will tell you that, first of all, the improvement of the relations between the United States of America and Georgia will be very much dependent on the improvement of the democratic environment in Georgia, because we know that relations between two countries deteriorated when, by this way, the Georgia Parliament adopted the Russian law. After, by this way, yes, Georgian authorities were criticized because of some violations during the parliamentary elections in Georgia, which were held, as you know, in October 26th of 2024. And accordingly, the U.S. lowest chamber of the U.S. Congress, House of Representatives, adopted so-called the Megabari Act, and we know that it is in the agenda of the Senate, upper house of the U.S. Congress, topic related to the evaluation of the situation in Georgia. And one of the main requirements for the U.S. side towards Georgia is against strengthening the democratic institutions and providing the fundamental principles of human rights. Accordingly, by this way, in my point of view, when the representative of the Department of State Department met with Minister of Foreign Affairs of Georgia, I think that this topic was being discussed during this meeting. And furthermore, it's necessary to mention that the United States of America has its geopolitical, geoeconomic, geostrategic interest towards the South Caucasus, towards Georgia as a country with important transit potentials. And I think that situation today is very difficult, but from the other side, taking into consideration the events in the Middle East, and of course, the U.S. will have more interest towards Georgia, which is located very close, which has a common border with Iran, but has very close relations between close location with Iran. For example, distance between Tbilisi and Tehran, it's about 900 kilometers. Accordingly, by this way, some requirements and interest from the official Washington, from the White House, will be increased in the nearest future toward Georgia. But I think that very much is dependent on the Georgian kind of authorities related to the protection of human rights.
Mr. Chitadze, do you believe this meeting signals a shift toward more active U.S. involvement in the South Caucasus, or is it more of a reaffirmation of existing policy?
I think that taking into consideration the current realities which are going on in the Middle East, which is, let's say, here bordering with South Caucasus region, I think that American interest, which existed before, yes, I mean, since the period of the disintegration of USSR. First of all, as you know, that those interests from US side were connected with the energy project which we are implementing in the Caucasus region and the Caspian Sea region, related to the construction of the pipelines, and also taking into consideration the Black Sea port of Georgia, and close location, as I mentioned here, from one side with Russia, from the other side with Iran. I think that all those factors will play a significant role and in the increasing interest of the White House toward Georgia and South Caucasus region. It is expected. Otherwise, I think that this meeting would have been held, which held several days ago. And I think that there were some requirements from the U.S. side towards Georgia. And from the other side, as I told you, and with your permission, I will repeat that very much is dependent on the steps which should be, by this way, implemented by the Georgian side for the rapprochement of the and somehow the improvement of the relations with the United States of America, because we should not forget that after the restoration of the independence of Georgia, USA released more than $6 billion US, I mean, in the framework of the different projects for the providing of the social economic development of Georgia and strengthening the democratic institutions in Georgia.
Nika Chitadze, thank you very much for sharing your insights with us today. We truly appreciate your time and expertise. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
In Ankara, strengthening regional cooperation and strategic ties were at the center of discussions when the Speaker of the Parliament of Georgia, Shalva Papuashvili, met with his Turkish counterpart, the Speaker of the Grand National Assembly of Türkiye, Numan Kurtulmuş, yesterday. The high-level meeting underscored the shared commitment of the two nations to deepen economic, political and regional collaboration. Georgia and Turkey continue to expand their economic ties and political engagement. The Speaker of the Parliament of Georgia, Shalva Papuashvili, met with the Speaker of the Grand National Assembly of Türkiye, Numan Kurtulmuş, in Ankara on Tuesday. During the meeting, both sides noted significant progress in bilateral and multilateral cooperation between both countries. They say the progress is reflected in growing economic ties and expanding political engagement. The speakers emphasized the steady pace of high-level visits between the two countries as a key driver of this positive momentum. Speaker Papuashvili expressed his appreciation to Türkiye for its unwavering support for Georgia's territorial integrity. The two sides discussed the encouraging state of inter-parliamentary relations, reaffirming their determination to further strengthen their relationship, highlighting the essential role parliamentary friendship groups play in bringing the nations closer. Attention also turned to trilateral parliamentary cooperation, with both speakers confirming that preparations are underway for a meeting involving the parliaments of Georgia, Azerbaijan and Türkiye. Regional and global developments were on the agenda as well, with both sides pledging continued efforts to promote peace and stability in the region. Finally, the meeting addressed major regional and strategic projects. The two speakers reaffirmed their readiness to enhance energy and transport connectivity, focusing on unlocking the full potential of the Middle Corridor, an increasingly vital route for trade and economic integration across the region. Pakistan has shown strong diplomatic support for Tehran, condemning Israel's attack on Iran as violations of international law. For more messages from Pakistan, we go to Kumrat and our Tamim Bahis.
Amid rising tensions between Iran and Israel, Pakistan has taken a strong diplomatic stance in support for Tehran, while firmly rejecting false reports about any nuclear threats. Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, in a meeting with Iran's ambassador in Islamabad, condemned what he called Israeli aggression and expressed full solidarity with the Iranian people. He reaffirmed Pakistan's support for Iran at the United Nations and stressed that Israel's actions violate international law and the UN Charter. Meanwhile, Pakistan's Deputy Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Ishaq Dar rejected what he called fake news, claiming Pakistan had threatened a nuclear strike against Israel. He clarified that Pakistan's nuclear capability is solely for national defense. Dar also said Iran had appreciated Pakistan's support at the United Nations and confirmed ongoing diplomatic efforts with both Iran and the United States. Former Prime Minister Nawaz Sharif also weighed in, calling Israel's actions oppressive and reaffirming Pakistan's long-standing support for Iran. He emphasized that Pakistan's nuclear status is meant to ensure peace, not to start wars. With diplomatic channels active and misinformation on the rise, Pakistan has called for calm, responsible reporting and dialogue over escalation, while standing firm in its support for Iran. Tamim Bahis reporting for AnewZ from Kumrat, Pakistan.
That's all we have for now. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to AnewZ for more.